In the Second Age, a mysterious being claimed to the elves he was an emissary of the Valar, the Angels of Middle-earth. He was Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, and his mission was helping the mortal races against the forces of evil. Or so he said, as this fair, angelic being was Sauron in disguise, infiltrating his worst enemies. The High King of Lindon, Gil-galad, and Galadriel, a wise, powerful and revered royal elf, were the first ones to refuse him. But the region's king, Celebrimbor, an ambitious craftsman, welcomed him with open arms. Sauron, as a master manipulator, told Celebrimbor that, together, they would create legendary artifacts that would bring forth the golden age of Middle-earth. Celebrimbor had a desire to become the greatest craftsman of his kin, bigger than Fëanor, creator of the Silmarils, jewels that shone like the moon, so beautiful and proud, that led Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, to war against heaven and earth. So the king of the Elven Smith and Anatar created the Rings of Power. There were 9 for men and 7 for the dwarves. Sauron had learned everything he needed to learn from the Forge Masters, and his plan was in full motion. He went back to Mordor and forged the One Ring in the fires of Mount Doom, the power he needed to control and corrupt the Ring-bearers and their peoples. Or in secret, Celebrimbor forged the 3 Elven Rings with everything he had learned from Anatar, not knowing the true face of one he called a friend. When Sauron realized what Celebrimbor had done, he declared war on the elves to seize these artifacts. It is at this point when Galadriel, who never trusted Anatar, suggested to split the rings to preserve the elven power in the coming wars.
This is Nennu, the Ring of Adamant, and I am its keeper.
She kept one, whereas Gil-galad and Círdan kept the others. Celebrimbor, though, never enjoyed the fruit of his pride. The elves were unprepared, so Sauron laid waste to Eregion and killed him with his own hands. He turned his body into a battle banner to further solidify the death of his deception to the Elven kingdoms. However, the Elven kingdoms of Rivendell and Lothlorien, with Elrond and Galadriel as ring-bearers and leaders, respectively, managed to survive up until the end, because the rings they had were not corrupted. And when Frodo destroyed the One Ring, the Elven rings lost power, therefore diminishing Elven's ability to stay in the mortal realm, and forcing them to leave.
Filmmakers, as writers, we had no interest whatsoever in putting our junk, our baggage into these movies. We just thought we should take what Tolkien cared about clearly, we should take those and we should put them into the film.
This is not the Rings of Power. This show has it all confused, because its first season deviated from lore greatly, and now they are expecting to go back as a sort of soft reboot, as if nothing had happened, creating inconsistencies they can only solve with extreme conveniences and illogical character decisions. But simultaneously, they are trying to keep and salvage the garbage original ideas they had that destroyed the lore in the first place. The show is trying to do these two vastly conflicting things at the same time: lore and lore-breaking original stories. Let's recap the first episode of Rings of Power Season 2 so you understand what I'm trying to say.
Why do you dance so to avoid revealing the truth?
Let's start with the Elven back and forth plotline. Galadriel chases Elrond to Lindon to prevent Elrond from telling what happened to the king. Galadriel tries to hide Sauron's identity at first.
I don't even know, I can't even tell you that,
The king hears the truth and wants the rings, but Elrond doesn't want to give them to Gil-galad.
Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby!
So he casually jumps to the river while the king's 2 guards stand idle. Elrond visits an old friend, Círdan, for guidance. Círdan sails away with the rings.
Bye, bitch!
And Galadriel captures Elrond. At least, she now recognizes her flaws.
I've failed enough of late, old friend. Help me succeed this time.
Galadriel, King Gil-galad and Elrond go back to Lindon. Without the rings they decided to go, so they sing a farewell song. These elves are super diverse, but this is whatever at this point. Círdan comes back with the rings. He changed his mind, teleported to Lindon's rushed goodbye party, and everyone was immediately tempted. One of the rings falls into Galadriel's feet, a nice representation of how the show handles the plot. In Discount Middle-earth, during the Second Age, there was a guy who said he was Halbrand, and he helped the elves build some magical rings because magic was their drug and they were running out of it. But in truth, he was Sauron, the evil guy. Once the elves found out, they said it was fine, and then they built more rings because they are more easily addicted than kids to Fortnite. The end. Anyway, the Elven bloodline was a back and forth, and it means King Gil-galad forgave Galadriel for not following orders and going to Valinor, going rogue, going to war with an army of men without permission, bringing the enemy to their doors, and then trying to hide the truth.
Who is he?
He is not what I thought. Which is the reason I did what I did.
What the fuck are you talking about?
What a bitch! Blaming the king, as he wants her to hunt Sauron again as if nothing had happened. Moreover, Galadriel is not the wise leader she is in lore, the one who helped the elves survive Sauron's deceit through wit and magic. She's just a dumb-headed warrior. For example, her excuse to using the rings is like, yeah, Sauron was there, and he worked with Celebrimbor for a month alone. He told him what to do and how to do it, but he didn't actually touch the rings, so they are fine. Are you sure, Galadriel? Says anyone else. And Galadriel replies, yes, because it's like this feeling I have.
He never touched them.
He worked with Celebrimbor for weeks.
Big deal! What are you gonna do about it? Throw me in prison?
The Rings of Power has it all confused. The elves created and split the Elven rings under Sauron's influence and took possession of these items whilst knowing about the Dark Hand that lurked behind them. They took them because it prevents them from diminishing in the mortal realm. This is at least sensical within the lore. Elves are immortal beings, and while they can die in battle or by accident, their bodies can live just as long as their souls allow it. In other words, they fade or diminish. Celebrimbor's rings were untainted and created with the purpose of preventing the fade. Halbrand's rings seem to do something similar, even if the show cares not to explain these things. But now half the Elven leaders know about Sauron, and we're supposed to believe that they use it and that Celebrimbor creates more rings under his influence. This is not Sauron deceiving the elves, this is the elves deceiving themselves. And this is the show deceiving us by trying to handle this as a cheap, soft reboot. A mess they created by starting by the end. Now, Sauron's flashback, tracing back to him meeting Galadriel.
Tides of fate are flowing.
It's a good showcase of the show's undeniable qualities, incredible talent and hard work in production, visual and sound departments. Centuries ago, Sauron, with another body, presented his evil plan to the orcs in a very casual manner. It was like, we will conquer the world and be very evil. We will do bad things with mysterious powers, and you will all die, suffer, scream, and cry. Do you like me as your king? Or, nah, he is casually betrayed not once, but twice. And it takes him centuries, possibly, to restore his body with some creative use of dark magic. He comes back as Halbrand, and he's facing repentance after a very casual conversation with a random stranger. Finally, he sails away to new lands, and a sea monster takes him to the biggest coincidence in television. At least there's some logic sprinkled in between, because the flashback is not congruent with what the show told us. The very first scene of Rings of Power told us Sauron took control of the orcs and Morgoth army after Morgoth defeat, but now he was just a chump. Now it's time for Halbrand's back and forth journey. After the battle in Mordor, he turns himself over to Adar. They act as if they've never seen each other before.
You remember me?
No, I think changing Adar's actor gave the characters some sort of meta-amnesia. Anyway, here's what happens. He presents himself as the king and wants to exchange the liberty of the humans the orcs captured for information about Sauron. Adar's army tortures him lightly for a scene. Halbrand tells Adar that Sauron came back and is working with the elves to create a new kind of power. He promises to find him, and Adar lets him go in exchange of his allegiance. Or so he believes. Finally, Halbrand goes back to Eregion. So what was the point of this whole trip again? Because Halbrand was already in Eregion. Maybe it's filling the very slowly paced 1 hour episode runtime of this show. Or maybe it's because the whole plot of this show is nonsensical, so the way they follow up their stories feel childish. Remember, Halbrand revealed himself as Sauron to Galadriel and then disappeared. Even so, Galadriel kept the information hidden and Celebrimbor finished the Elven rings. A logical story would not have Sauron return into this place, as he already revealed he was the enemy. But the writers wanted to follow the lore after breaking it, so they had limited options to set his return after disappearing, all of which were equally silly. He could, for example, hide, he could do a mindless trip, he could transform his body and do the same he was doing. You get the point. Take this into consideration when seeing other resolutions the show has. Another example is Adar letting Halbrand go. He fears Sauron will enslave the orcs and he wants these innocent creatures to live happily in the scorched wasteland. with all of the humans they have enslaved. Season 2 has no answer yet to who he is or what he wants, and is preparing the way to get him out so Sauron can get his army of innocent orcs and go back to lore. Lastly, Eregion has not heard his Sauron. Halbrand went to Eregion and Mordor and came back, whilst Galadriel went to Lindon, the Grey Heavens and back to Lindon. And this messenger, this single solitary messenger, King Gil-galad, sent to Celebrimbor with the most important piece of information the elves had, has not arrived. I'd say convenient is no longer appropriate. How about drink-venient, huh? Next, the Wizard and the Proto-Hobbits. The Wizard and Frodo are on a journey to find a wand in the desert. They are lost until Poppy, teleports in and finds the duo very casually. She also happens to know a song that will lead them through the desert. Convenient is no longer appropriate for this show. I think the word is power-venient. You get this one? Like Rings of Power? Huh? I gave more thought to this than the writers for episode 1. The Rings of Power Season 2 is going back and forth between lore and lore-breaking ideas, and the whole story is backwards, because Amazon is telling the story by the end. Evidently, this causes major contrivances, so the story going forward depends on extremely casual storytelling. The Rings of Power only works with the power of convenience. You get it? Like the name of this video? Whoa! I agree that the season has bumped the already stellar levels of quality, and I think the sequence where Sauron restores his body was exceptional. I must add that Adar and Halbrand's performances are impressive. But how come the writers didn't put as much effort as the rest of the team? I'll come back for more episodes as soon as I can. You know what to do if you like this channel more than the first season of Rings of Power. And keep the comment section
Civilized.